So we're here today, and the theme for this interactive panel is Business Case for Women on Boards. And the first thing I asked myself is, what's the fuss? What is this all about? Why are we so particular about boardrooms and at the same time particular about gender diversity in the boardrooms? Boardrooms for listed organizations as well as the national agencies, the different organizations that we have, the likes of the MTN, Dangote, the Central Bank, and even the Ports Authority. They are not just corporate tables. They are strategic governance arenas where decisions are being made, and these decisions have a ripple effect through markets. They shape our national policy and at the same time impact millions of lives, which include you and I. So that is why there is a fuss about this. Now, the listed organizations, the top 30 on the NGX, for the 323 board seats that are available, 96 of them are occupied by women. It is a good number, so I think that deserves a round of applause. But we are not yet there. There is still a lot of room for improvement. So the purpose of this interactive panel is to let us know that having a gender balanced board is not just, it's not like it's a nice to have. There's a strategic positioning. It's an imperative business reason why we should have it. So we all should be able to leave here armed with information, armed with statistics on why this should be. And I am so blessed today with an amazing panelist to help us do good justice to this. Like I had mentioned, some will be joining us along the way. So let me take my seat while I gradually introduce the amazing panel that we have for this session. Please do help me make them feel extremely welcomed as I introduce them. First on my list is Mr. Danladi Ivahinjan. He's an investor, a veteran in that space. Please help me celebrate him. Thank you so much. Allow me to still give a little overview of your profile, sir. So Mr. Danladi is the CEO for Verod Capital. Help me celebrate him. He's an investor and one that has been at the forefront of leading several equity investments across Africa. He's a leading investor and the thought leader, and he brings unique perspectives from private equity and investment world on how board composition impacts governance, performance, as well as value creation. It's a pleasure having you here today. Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that. Next, I'll be introducing, and I believe she's online, Mrs. Ndidi Unoli Edozen, a board member of the International Sustainability Standards Board, IFRS Foundation, a respected global governance leader and sustainability expert. Ndidi brings deep insight into how board diversity aligns with the ESG standards and international best practices. Is Mrs. Ndidi online? Can we have a live feed?
I can hear you.
Okay, you're welcome. Please help me celebrate her. Thank you. Next on the list of my panelists is someone very, very dear to my heart, Mrs. Ngova. Okay, Mrs. Ngova. Are we good to go? Mrs. Ngova Iheme Nwanko. Please help me celebrate her. She's the Executive Director at NESG and also a Board of Trustees for WIMBIZ, Women in Management, Business and Public Service. Thank you very much for accepting to be here. Like I mentioned earlier, the Minister of Women Affairs will also be joining us as we proceed. But without taking too much time, we'll be going right into it. And I'll be starting first with Mr. Danladi. I'm going round all the speakers just to get your insight, first of all, about this thing. I had mentioned earlier that what's the force all about. What do you think about the business case for women on boards? Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate being invited here to speak to you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your presence. You didn't have a chance to eat lunch, so truly grateful that you're willing to sit and hear us. And hopefully you'll find something interesting from this conversation. Thanks for the invite, and to my fellow panelists, very good to be here with you. You know, I struggle, let me just speak very frankly, I struggle with sessions like this. It's obvious, right? We need more female representation on boards. The benefits, we've all read the benefits. We all know what the benefits are. The data is out there. Boards that have adequate representation of women on the boards, just the companies end up doing better than other companies. Financial results are better. Stock prices are better. Therefore, investors give them a premium. Risk management is far better. If you have a board with all of the same sorts of people thinking the exact same way, you'll have more gaps. It's like having a football team with all strikers. It'd be very good to have a team with 11 Ronaldos or whatever their names are, right? But that's not going to work. You need people with different skill sets, different people perspectives, different points of view to, you know, have the best team. So we just need better representation. I am not sure how much more data needs to be out there to show that that is the right way to go. So what we need to be talking about is, how are we going to stop talking about it? How is it actually going to be implemented, right? How are we going to, what are tangible ways? And change is not easy. Nothing is ever given. Sometimes things have to be taken in whatever legal way is necessary. But, you know, it's time for the talk to be over, I feel, right? The why, we've gone over it 1,000,000 times. The question now for me is the how. And I hope we'll speak about a bit more about this as the conversation goes on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Danladi. That does really set the tone. How do we move from just talking about it into action? I'll be moving next to you, Ngova. What is your view, the business case for women on boards?
So, I mean, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Short notice, but I'm really glad to be on this panel, and I'm especially glad to have Danladi. And I think for me, the reason why I'm especially glad to have him is he spoke a little bit around what does the research say. And Verod actually put their money behind it. They commissioned a research paper through WIMBIZ a few years ago to show exactly this. And the study exactly showed this. So as he said, the data is there. We've done the work. We know. I think in addition to sort of, you know, pushing for it, one of the things that I'd like us to leave this panel with is the understanding that truly there is a business case and an imperative for women on boards. Because I'm not sure how many of us truly understand it. I think we feel it, but we're not clear that the research actually does show. And the research does. So as we talk today, I'm hoping that you'll get those nuggets. So as you go back into your everyday jobs, whether you're men, whether you're women, you understand the science behind it. And it moves from being an emotional conversation to one that is strategically important. I was saying just before I ran in here that you wouldn't fly a plane with only one engine, right? Or you wouldn't, you know, I mean, you may have to if there is an emergency, but you won't do it for long, and you won't succeed for long before the plane comes tumbling down. And with more than 50% of our population is women. And given where Nigeria stands currently and the desires for the country, as we heard earlier today with the panels, it's now more important than ever that we fire from all engines. So that I think is what I'd like to see happen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really like what you touched on about, and I know that in having several conversations with people, some would go like, yes, but how do we even really justify this topic, as the case may be, especially for the business case of it. Sometimes even when a woman takes a position and she's doing way better, it looks like it was just time for things to get better, as the case may be. And I'll be going on to Ndidi shortly. But before I go over to her, I would just like to highlight some statistics that I was able to curate. In France, for instance, there's a mandate that for every board, 40% female representation is compulsory. If you do not meet up with that, there are penalties to be applied. The European Union also requires that by mid-2026, at least 40% of non-executive board positions must be held by the underrepresented gender. The UK has like a voluntary club, it's called 30% Club, and they've been able to move the FTSE 100 boards from 12% female representation to 39%, and this is as of 2023. Kenya, our neighboring African country, has been able to achieve over 36% female board representation in state-owned enterprises through deliberate regulatory reforms. And like I said, I'm moving over to Ndidi. I hope she can hear us. I would want to hear our own views, especially from a global standard perspective for the business case for women on boards. Over to you, Ndidi.
Thank you so much, and I hope you can hear me too.
Yes, we can.
Thanks so much also for speaking to the statistics, and let me speak on what the previous panelists have spoken about. Absolutely applaud, first of all, the work of women, of course, and then your presence, because it's not enough to have female voices. We actually also need all voices speaking for this. I like the fact that you landed on statistics, and I think there are many reports that speak to this, whether it's McKinsey's Diversity Wins report that speaks to the fact that, when you have gender diversity on executive teams, you're 25% more likely to have above average profitability. So it's not, there are, or the MSCI data, I think this was 2023, that talk about a return on equity of 10.1% higher, as opposed to a 7.4% lower, where there was not adequate gender diversity. Or the University of California Risk Mitigation and Governance report, which speaks to the question of attendance. And I'm not saying that men don't take their roles seriously, but they did say that there was significantly higher attendance by women. And maybe that just has to do with the fact that we have to learn multitasking much sooner. But I think that's changing. In South Africa at the moment, I'm sorry that I'm not a Nigerian person, where the laws have just been changed that make a significant shift in terms of balancing out the genders. So it's both genders. So the point I really wanted to make was, what is really important is to talk about the fact that homogeneity on a board is a systemic risk. A table of similar people and common genders leads to unchallenged assumptions. It means missed market shifts. It means unseen reputational risks as well. And in fact, it also means poor customer insights, because in some industries, men are 80% of the spending in those industries. So in other words, it's really absolutely essential not just to have women at the table, to actually reshape the table for a more comprehensive perspective, especially on risks and opportunities, which are so essential to business, but also redesigning the boardroom table for better performance.
Amazing. having a gender balanced board is avoiding risk. So it's risky when you don't have a balanced board making the decisions. And I know Mr. Danladi also mentioned earlier about group thinking, where if you have just the same gender, all thinking along the same line. Before I move on to the next question, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the chairman of the NESG, Mr. Niyi Yusuf. Thank you for joining us, sir. All right, Mr. Danladi, as a veteran investor, I would like to hear from you. How do you perceive organizations when it comes to the gender diversity at the board level? Does this influence your decision as an investor?
Thanks for that question. The actual gender diversity on the board does not influence our decision to invest. It does not influence our decision to invest or not. But the mindset of the entrepreneur, the sponsors, and their willingness to correct and improve the gender numbers is what makes a difference to us, right? So we've invested in companies with 9 men on the board and no women. But we'll have an explicit conversation ahead of time and say, look, that is not okay. We need to change that. Are you fine? Are you not? It's that answer that makes the difference, not actually how they start out, right? And you know, it's interesting because I'm fortunate to be part of a company that was awarded a best in class for gender lens investing globally for all private equity firms. And it's interesting because we never intended to set out to be a gender lens investor. That was not our focus in any way, shape, or form. We were just looking for the best businesses we could invest in Nigeria that had good returns, but also a large level of impact. And looking backwards to what we've done over the past 10 years, and this was a push from our investors who are all global development financial institutions. Some look at our portfolio saying, you know, you qualify for this thing called the 2X certification. And we didn't even know that looking backwards, we had always, or you know, we backed more women-founded, women-led businesses, right? And they actually did far better than the rest of our portfolio, right? So when you talk about the economic incentive to do so, it's there. For us, it is clear. We don't need to go out to look for external statistics. We've seen that internally, where these decisions where that actually makes a big difference. And there's something my fellow panelists on the board said, which is, you know, not just having women on the board or in leadership, right? But it's having women in positions of influence as well. You're not looking for a token person on a board somewhere, right? You know, strategy committee, who's that headed by, right? Operations, you know, human resources, governance, audit, you know, chairperson. So we're not saying, okay, look, women should head every committee in the company. Sorry, but what we are saying is not tokenism, but real positions where, you know, change can be driven, where influence is very, very real, right? So for us, that's really important. And I'll go back to where I started, is sort of how can we get there? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being here. I think it's fantastic, sir, that you are here. It's symbolic, but it's also very real. And I know we've spoken before, so I know where your heart is. But sorry, I'm going to call NESG out just a little bit. Like I said, sorry, I just speak my mind, right? How many women are on the board of NESG? I understand that just looking through, there are 3 new members brought on the board. They were all male. So where are we starting, right? And it's not to call it an NESG, so, you know, it's all of us. There are many circumstances in my own business where I do things that probably elevate the men a little bit more than the women. I'm not conscious of it, right? And what I've tried to do in my own company is create an environment where people can call me out all the time. If I'm traveling for a meeting somewhere, I'll much quicker ask a young male individual in my company to follow me than a young female. If I need something done at 11 p.m. at night, I'm more likely to give a young male the opportunity that I'm not going to start calling a young female at 11 o'clock at night. I may call that young individual 1 a.m. saying, bros, get out of bed. I need this thing in 3 hours, right? What am I doing? I'm developing someone a lot more. They have a lot more influence on me. When we invest in another business, as they've grown through the organization, I'm not going to say, this person has a bit more experience than this other person. And they may get the board seat that Verod puts on that company. I didn't realize this until someone called me out on it and said, you're right, too. Okay, how do I balance that? And then they're tough. So what I'm trying to say is, like, a lot of times, many of us who believe that we're advocates, we also miss out on a lot. How do we begin to change that? And that's the question. And for me, I think it comes to two things. One is, and we see this publicly in the US, Europe, different places, capital talks, right? So our ability as investors, right, or even in publicly traded companies, push where necessary. Certain banks have maybe more than 50% women on the board. You should all go and bank there and leave the banks who don't think it's important to do their own. Capital talks, consumers walk. Women are way more than 50% of buying decisions on average across industries. Okay, what changes can we make there, right? Because any CEO can sit down, or chairperson, or whatever it may be, and wax poetic about how, companies do better when there are women on the board, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then we all go back and there's no real change, right? The strength is probably in the capital that goes into these businesses and the consumers. And we've seen, again, in the West, where things are just a bit more public, and I think it can happen here very easily. Change occurs when people begin to agitate. And people say, no, you might be well-intentioned, X, Y, Z, A, B, C, but we need to see this change. So let's put Mr. Chairman and put him up to the task and say, when are we going to see, women on the board of NESG get to 50%? What's the commitment? By next year. No, I'm serious. If you don't do it, nobody will. What room are you in? I'm sorry, let's speak. What room are we in? I spent 10 minutes here looking for this room. I was sent over to the other building. I was sent upstairs. I told people I couldn't find the building. I took a picture on my phone. I said, look, there's no Delta State on this list. Oga, please. I'm supposed to be speaking on a panel. Where am I supposed to go? You're in a corner. It's not on purpose. But still, you should be you should be the plenary. All women in here should say, look, next year plenary, I want to be there, all the ministers are there and speak the truth. Right? Again, nothing is ever given, huh? It's not given. You have to take it. Otherwise, you'll come back and you have so many different sessions of the same thing. We need one woman on the board because X, Y, Z, A, B, C. It's not going to change. Like anything in life. Again, and I say, no one is purposely trying to hold anyone down. I fundamentally believe that. Right? No one's trying to hold everything. I'm just busy trying. My top 10 list of things is just not, even my top 100 is not, it's not number one. You need to make it number one on someone else's list. Right? We all need to make it number one on other people's list. Sorry.
All right. Thank you, Danladi. Your opening remarks around the number of women on the board, does that affect your decision? No, it doesn't, but the direction of travel does. So what I can assure you is that the NESG is also in that direction of travel. There are two vice chairpersons, one male, one female. So for us, it's not tokenism. It's really putting women in the right spot. And I do apologize for this corner, but I thought corner seat is very, it's coveted. With a
view. Thank you so much, Chairman. And please do help me celebrate, both male allies. I am very, I like the fact that your decisions for investment is not like a no deal once you don't have a job, but there's room for improvement, there's room for dialogue to sensitize the entrepreneurs on the importance of this, and then you see if they are aligned and flowing in that direction. And of course, our chairman too for NESG has also confirmed that they are in that direction of travel. So next year, we definitely won't be at the corner seat, we'll be on the main stage with the vice president and the president listening to our views. Thank you. Okay, I'll be moving on again to Ngova, and I mean, it's interesting that the conversation is also going along this line. I want to leverage on your experience this time around. There's been an argument, pretty much like what we're talking about now, on the shortage of women, and this time around, people say, even when we have these quotas in place, when we have the policies in place, where are the women? So, from your experience and the fact that many have been arguing on this way, how can we shift from the narrative to focus on system gaps in identifying and showcasing the already available female talent, especially across different sectors? So there are women that are actually board ready, but sometimes maybe because they feel they don't have a chance and all of that. How can we move forward in showcasing these board ready women? Thank you.
So Danali made a really interesting point. And I remember sitting in a room in a WIMBIS conference many years ago, and one of the speakers said at that conference that he was quite sad because he was the CEO of one of the big financial institutions, and he had sort of a management team, executive directors, and there was great balance. I think at the time they were almost 50-50. But below that, they didn't have any female successors at all, internally, like none. And the reason he gave at the time was that he felt that women were not putting their hands up for the types of sort of assignments that you just spoke to. So he was saying things like, often when you're looking to sort of place somebody in a GM level, in a senior level, you want to see the breadth of their experience. And you find women who have been in one particular department all their lives, and they're not willing to move because they're very comfortable where they are. And I remember hearing him speak, and I remember thinking, I was very annoyed initially. But it took a while to reflect on it and say, okay, what are the learnings? And I think that goes to the question that you're asking and some of the things that WIMBIS has been doing. I think the first thing is the intentionality from the companies around developing their talent and the belief that diversity matters. Because diversity matters. There are three main reasons why diversity matters. The first one, and I think Danadi alluded to it, and I believe so did Ndidi, is really around blind spots. So when you have a board that's homogeneous, it's very easy to everybody jump off a cliff in the absolute wrong direction. And we've seen live examples. We've seen companies who have been totally wiped out by something new that they never saw coming. We've seen companies that have gone and done amazing brand campaigns, spent millions of dollars behind it, and completely messed it up because they didn't understand the diverse perspectives and how this campaign would be received. The second thing is around innovation. Studies say over and over again that the more diverse the unit is, the more innovative it is. So it's not about women and men, all women. It's about diversity. And it's gender, it's age, but gender is very important because that brings a different lens. It brings a new problem-solving approach. And the third one is around governance. When you're intentional about certain things, you will find that things fall in place. And so when we then look at ways in which to get women more visible and get them ready, the first thing for me is about companies buying into the fact that that diversity is required and then being ready to roll up their sleeves to do the work. The next thing then is how do you develop the talent? So looking through the sort of the talent pipeline to recognize where are the gaps, where are the blockers, what are the issues? Because there are sometimes challenges and issues. We may laugh about it, but I remember during COVID, I had a number of women who would on the side say to me, we need to come back to work because I really cannot get any work done at home. When I'm at work, I'm at work. But when I'm at home, I'm required to be wife, mother. And so it was important for us as a company, once we got this sort of little feedback, to very quickly change the policies around work from home so that they weren't these blanket, which to some people was great, but we recognized it wasn't. So it's about understanding what the little nuances are and being able to sort of shape the policies that you put in place around it. I think the third thing for me is around the self-belief. So do the women recognize and understand that they can do it? Do they have the skills? Do they have the support? Do they have the encouragement from both men and women to be able to achieve their full potential? Are we giving them the same opportunities to develop? Are we sending them on the same trainings? Are we giving them assignments? And one of the things I've heard is, this gentleman, when he was speaking, the guy I spoke about, he kind of said, I want to transfer a woman to another region, for example, and she says she cannot go her family. I'm like, why does that development have to only be about transferring? How about short-term assignments? I've been fortunate to work in an organization that recognizes this. And so instead of sending you or moving you for 6 months, they may say, look, we've got a 1-month assignment, a 2-month assignment. So it's about recognizing that there are nuances, but you still have to develop. And then, of course, making sure that people have a pipeline. And Wimbus has done very well, so well done to Momi and the team at the HQ who curate a list of board-ready women. And well done to the women as well that have gotten themselves board-ready by either doing the Wimbus program or doing other programs, getting themselves out there, putting their hands up, and making sure that they're part of it. But it's really important. I think the starting point has got to be the belief that it makes sense to have women, and then creating that intentionality around bringing them on board.
Thank you so much. Please help me celebrate Ngova. I especially like the real life examples that you were able to highlight to drive home the point. I'll be moving on to Ndidi again online, and this will be 2-in-1 for you. And if you're also able to share examples on how boards, so examples on how having a gender diverse or not having a gender diverse board has been able to make a positive or negative impact at every point in time. The second bit of the question would be that from your experience, how can boards go beyond the numbers to ensure women's representation translates into real influence and impact? So you mentioned Wimbus and Gova, and we do have corporate organizations approaching us several times to nominate board-ready women for various positions. And most times I ask these people, why? Why do you want a woman on the board? And I've had one particular HR professional say, why are you questioning me? They say, no, we put women there. Please, just give me the list. So it simply means that some people make this request, not even understanding why. So please, Ndidi, how can this translate to real influence and impact? Thank you.
That's a great question. It's also a tough question. And I have 2 responses. One response is from my previous job, where I was Group Chief Sustainability and Governance Officer at Dangote. And I think you can see that Africa's wealthiest man, when he talks about putting his daughters on boards and when he talks about succession planning, there is no question of gender. He just believes in their potential to win and deliver value constructively. And they work together with others in order to create that value. That's one example. The other example I'll give is, well, I think it's an obvious example, and probably half of you in the room will guess that this is the example I'll use, but Zenith Bank's first female group managing director, I mean, the evidence is clear in the numbers. What you saw an 88% increase of profit after tax in 2004 from 2023. You saw a 269% increase, again, shift. So you saw significant outcomes in terms of profit after tax, in terms of customer deposits, in terms of gross earnings of the company. And this is partly also driven by the fact that, women, I think Theodora has been in the firm for 26 years. And so what she does is she understands the organization from the bottom up, and she's able to deploy that in order to create value. And this is one strong point that women have: loyalty. Loyalty, persistence, perseverance, and the willingness to look at all angles. But really, what is the business case for me for women on board? One is, it is a strategy. It's not a nice to have, it's not some. I don't know what it is. Okay? Because I can't see you anymore. Can you still hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. I can't hear you anymore.
Breaking. Maybe you give it one more shot. Okay, technical glitches. Thank you very much, Ndidi. The real influence and impact, you had mentioned and highlighted the resilience of women as well as their loyalty. And of course, you empowered us with more numbers on an example of the Zenith Bank MD and the over 200% growth that she's been able to achieve. Thank you very much. As we're coming to the close of this panel, I will just want to quickly give a little bit of insight. Now, WIMBIZ, in coalition with WILAN, WISCA, and the Nigerian Governors Forum Secretariat, formed a coalition to drive 3 main agendas. And one of it is that we're advocating for 35% female representation on boards of listed organizations. I would want to ask my panelists what they think about this. I had also highlighted some statistics of some countries who have quotas in place to accelerate action when it comes to growing female representation in boards. And this is what we're trying to advocate for, and this will entail engaging the NGX a whole lot to please consider putting in place a policy that will drive at least 35% female representation. Mr. Daladi, what do you think about this agenda?
Sorry, I think it's good. Why 35%?
Could be 50, right?
Why not higher? But how are you going to enforce it? How is it, how are you going to have the right incentives and the right disincentives? I think that's almost more important to think about than a number. And a number 35% is good compared to where we are today, right? But how are you going to get that done? Are you going to publish every year the top 10 list of offenders, right? And make that very, very clear and transparent? Or are we going to come next year and say move from 26.5 to 26.7 so we're making progress? I don't know. But let's focus on how we're going to get things actually done. For me, that's far more important. But it's a great first step, don't get me wrong at all. I support it fully. I think it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Your support is noted, and we'll follow through on it. I'll go over next to you.
So it is brilliant, and it's something that has been in the works for a while, so it would be fantastic if it finally comes through. I think to answer your question, Danladi, we had already thought through how it would work, and there have to be penalties. Because that's really the only way you can make sure that people do the right thing. So it starts off with making sure that you have to declare sort of your statistics, but we also recognize that to do that, you need a fair starting point. So something that WIMBIZ worked on many years ago was a scorecard. And that scorecard was to allow and enable, and we worked on it in conjunction with the NGX at the time. and it was to ensure a level playing field with how it's calculated, so that you can kind of sort of at the bottom see the intake, see the progression, see the intentionality behind the policies, and then see what the result is. So there's the understanding that at day one, it may not be 35%, but how are you migrating towards that? And then that then dovetails into who you give awards for doing well, so that those awards are not seen as just having no meaning. We can really demonstrate under which conditions you were put forward for that. And then with penalties, it was really around, they have to be financial, they have to be social. But one of the things that you said that I'd like to re-emphasize is about capital. And I think there is the need for women to vote for themselves. And you can only vote for yourself by being intentional. What are the companies that you want to support? What are they doing? The produce that you buy every day when you're going to the shops to buy it, the economic decisions you make, are you voting for yourself? Because if you're not, then it's really going to be even more difficult for everybody else to fight for us. So if I was going to leave with one thing for each of us in this room, is we each have a role to play in this conversation. And it starts with, first of all, putting yourself up, believing you can do it, so that you also sit on boards and advocate. And when you get there, please make sure that there are other seats available. But in addition to that, the everyday decisions that you make them consciously in favor of yourselves and of the women behind you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So before I give a summary, yes, you are also in support of... Thank you. Okay, please go.
And Govi, I think you're entirely correct. And sorry if I just sounded very blasé about 35% being a number. Again, I think it's a trajectory. Same way I mentioned that we'll invest in a company that has 0 women on the board. I'm actually more impressed from someone that goes from 0 to 20% and someone that goes from 30 to 35%. So it is exactly intentionality, what's the direction of travel. Yes, I would not, name and shame someone at 20% if they were 0% the year before. I didn't mean to sound that way. But what's the progress of change? And it's really, really important. The other thing, I just love what you said about just being intentional about every decision that's being made, right? So that's critical. But then also, don't let any of us men off the hook easy as well, right? Any of us. I hear a lot of times people say, oh, of course I support women. I have daughters now. If that's the case, there will not be an issue because we all have daughters.
Yeah.
Right? So by definition, that's not enough, right? No one should be able to get away with that. But like literally, what are we really, really doing to create this fair and equitable workplace at all levels in the organization, right? It's critical.
Thank you so much. And just to also add, when you said what are the steps to ensure that this becomes a reality, we know that even getting to these numbers is not something that will happen overnight. So even if this quota is in place, there's supposed to be like a future date set by so and so, year 2027, for instance. Let's ensure that at least there's 35% female representation across board. So they have room to adjust before the penalties are being assigned. Before I move on to Ndidi, and I hope the technical glitch has been sorted, since I can follow Q, I'm also going to put our chairman on the spot to confirm, that he's in support and alignment with this agenda for female. Please help me celebrate NESG. All right, Ndidi, over to you. What are your views on the request for a quota in place for listed organizations for female representation on boards?
I think what I was trying to say before, is this is not a nice to have. It current financial statements. So the non-financial information that institutions like the International Sustainability Standards Board are adding in terms of disclosures of governance structures, and particularly, for example, in terms of the diversity of boards, which help with risk management, help with resilience, help in understanding how the market reacts and responds. Exposure to social, regulatory, and reputational risks are reduced as a result of gender diversity because, as Daniel was saying, it's a question that is asked. You may not say, oh, I'm not going to invest in a solid company because it only has male board members, but certainly you will respond more positively to a company that is looking at enhancing diversity of gender as a positive integration into its strategy, because this also enhances long-term confidence of investors and attracts more cost-effective long-term capital. And this then goes not just from the board in terms of board composition, but cascades all the way through representation of companies' staffing structure. And especially in countries like Nigeria, where we're talking about supply chains, global supply chains, for example, the last meeting we had with my chair, who was, and then I'll stop here, who was the chief executive officer and chair of Danone, which was the world's largest food and beverage company. The example he likes to use most is the example of working on carbon insets with smallholder farmers and securing their global supply chain with the smallholder farmers, a large number of whom were female. The most reliable and dependable ones in terms of credit and payments were female. And we must not forget that a significant proportion of our value chain, of our economy, is led by the informal sector, which is carried by women. And so even if they're not sitting on boards, it is women who actually see women, but also men who are insightful, forward-thinking, as we do have men in the room, that understand that it's so important to take into cognizance the advantages that this gender and this perspective and this business perspective bring to the table, not just to boards, not just to the constitution of employees, but also to the informal sector that carries our economy. And I have many stories to tell about that, but those are stories for another day.
Thank you so much. Having a gender balanced board is not a nice to have, but an imperative reform to even get to building a purposeful and inclusive Nigeria by the year 2030, if I would quote the theme for the NESG. It's supposed to be an interactive panel, so I will open the floor for 1 or 2 questions before I take last comments from our panelists. Any question in the room? Okay.
Okay. Okay, I'm Dr. Maki Dowu. Just a comment to support what Ngova has said and what you also said. As women, we shouldn't depend on the men. We should actually fight to ensure that we get women in these places. And I want to give an example. I was Group MD of Express Payments for 5 years. What did I do? In those 5 years, I made sure that I employed women in the top positions. So we had a situation where we actually then had 60% women and 40% men in executive management. Yes, you know. So it's something that women, you have to be deliberate about it. We have to fight for it. Push the men, fight for the shares. And I always say to people, do not think that we're looking to get those positions because we're women. No, we want those positions because we qualify for the positions. And when you mentioned about women they don't have enough women, companies saying that that's not true. There are women who are ready for these positions. There are women who will do these things. You mentioned about women that you call, not wanting to call a woman at 11 a.m., yes, because she's married or something. When I was in banking, when my ATM was on fire, she knows, she was with me, at 2 a.m., I got up and I went. My husband went with me. That's the support he gave me. So I believe that women are ready. They are ready, so let us push and make sure that women get at least minimum the 35%. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Stephanie. I'm with FMDQ Group. This is to Miss Kova and Mr. Danadi. I like how Mr. Danadi said at the beginning of his speaking that I like how you phrase it as poetry, because we have been talking about this for a long time. I like to think I'm young, and I know that they've been talking about including women in these things since before I was born, and it's poetry because it's nice to listen to. It has a nice ring to it in our head, but like most poetry, we go home, we're like, oh, that sounded very nice, but, you know, if I hear it again, it would be nice, but I might not exactly try to commit it to memory or do anything about individual sentences or stanzas. So I do think, and I agree with the fact that it's time that we do more and say less, because we've been saying a lot for decades. That's one. Two, to Mrs. Ngova. She asked, I think they said something about women not being ready to take on these positions, which to an extent is bollocks. Pardon my French. To an extent, I agree that that's not true. Many women are ready. They aren't given the platform, depending on the context that you think about it. But I also know that as much as there are women who may be professionally qualified to take on these positions, many may disagree with me, many might not, but there are women who actually are not, dare I say, mentally prepared for these positions, which is not their fault. And I believe that platforms like WIMBIZ are working to improve that. So how can we spread this empowerment? How can we spread this awareness and actually make these young women believe and develop them with the mental fortitude that matches their professional expertise to take on these positions? Because a woman might have A+ in all these things. She walks into a room, maybe she doesn't have the confidence, she doesn't have the foundations, and somebody tells her, you're not good enough. She knows she's good enough, but she doesn't have enough mental fortitude to actually fight back. And then she cowers in the corner and believes she's not good enough and stays in the so-called comfortable position that she has maintained for the past decade or couple of years. And then somebody out there doing their research, taking their data, says, oh, these women have been there for a long time. They don't have the breadth of experience.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I have one more question here, and then I'll leave the room for you to answer.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you. Very insightful conversation. So I guess mine is a comment, maybe not a question.
Please introduce yourself.
Sorry? Oh, yeah. My name is Toluwalugo Dutayo. I'm a partner with Deloitte. And I want to give life example of myself. And just to score a point on are women ready? I always say I don't believe there's a glass ceiling. I believe sometimes it's what we create of ourselves. You may say I'm being harsh, but having been in professional service for over 20 years, I've experienced it. I like what she said about what she did. And I think it's about intentionality. As at the time I was a manager, there was no female partner in my department. And you will wonder in a big professional service firm that way. And by the time I had my own first baby, I called my boss to say I wasn't coming back to work, that I just couldn't do it. And I'm going to the point of capacity building and mentoring. And it was like they rallied around me. It was like, no, you can do it. We know the quality you bring to the table. You only need to put support system structure in place to let you do it. Initially it was tough, but eventually I caught it. And immediately I caught it, I told myself that if nothing, I'll be the first female tax partner in this place. And today, just like what she's saying, I think we're about 50% now to the men. But then it took something on Deloitte. It was intentionality. The percentage we're working with now is 40%. As of today, at least within my department, tax, we're 39.5%. And just this week, I was in a room, and you see, it's just for us to get there. By the time we see our capability, and there's something about us women, when we are given the opportunity, I think there's something that happens to us. I'm so bold to say, like, I don't know, even for me, the confidence, when I saw that support, now we are in these rooms and we are like, what's the succession plan? And like you said, we saw the gap. So it's intentionality on every one of us. We looked at the gap. We've seen that till 2028, if we don't do something, we're going to have a gap again. And so we want to work with you. We are working amongst ourselves to see how we can empower those younger ladies like me who wanted to give up. So I do that myself. Of course, I get to a point of saying, okay, maybe you can't do it in this sector. Do you want to go to this field and all that? But we all can work together to ensure we never get to a point. I think that 5% is still low, and I think we can do more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Intentionality is what I hear being spoken, but she would like to know how can women get the support, and especially those that have been told that they're not able to. Would you like to say something about that?
So I'm not sure I said that women cannot do it. Women can definitely do it. But the one thing I also want us to recognize in this room is the privilege that those of us in this room have. And not every woman does. And I think it's very important that as we speak, we recognize that privilege. And it's a responsibility on us, therefore, to create the opportunities for the women who don't have that privilege to get to where we are, okay? And the reason I say this is because, again, when I sort of reflect on that statement from that CEO, I was very angry, you know, pretty much like you. It's bollocks. But I had to reflect and take what that message really was, right? Which of it is for them to do better? Which of them is for us as WIMBIZ to do better and support? And which of it is for the women themselves to do better? I think it's only when we are sort of making sure that all three areas of that triangle meet up that we can, you know, be truly successful. From a WIMBIZ perspective, there are a number of programs that WIMBIZ organizes. There's the mentorship part of it. There's inspiring. So I hope everybody in this room is coming to the conference, 6th and 7th of November. I'd love to see everybody there. And then there are opportunities for you to give back, even with WIMBIZ. So we do the Big Sister program. There are lots of other programs that we do. But beyond that, I think a really big part of it is just mentoring each other in the workspace. So one of the things that I have found, like the lady who spoke about Deloitte, is that there are women in every day that you walk into the office that are struggling. So they might be struggling with the job itself. They might be struggling with something personal. They might be struggling with something that's happened. And I think it's important for us as women to recognize that we're only as strong as the weakest link. So it's important for us to intentionally think about what is that message that I am putting out for other women around. Am I pulling people into my circle? Am I pulling people up? Am I having the conversations that are bold? You know, Danadi sat here and he challenged the chair. And I was thinking, oh my God, you're challenging. But really, that's what we should be doing, right? Respectfully, but challenging not the same. Challenging ourselves, challenging the corporations. But we have to be able to speak up boldly about what it is that we want to see. The last thing I'll say is, again, it goes back to the privilege, is that we are so fortunate. And I tell lots of people, we're fortunate. Most of us, you've gone to school, and there hasn't been a choice as to whether to educate you or somebody else. You've been fortunate to get into your career. You've gotten a job. There are many people who want to and are not. You're fortunate if you have a partner who is supportive of you being in there. Many other women don't. And even as you're working in those, in wherever you are, there are women who are dealing with so many of these things. So I do ask that in our individual companies, there are mentoring circles, there are conversations, there's a sharing of books, there's a sharing of advice, there's putting women forward, even yourself putting other women forward when you have a chance. Say, look, have you thought about her? I really think she wants to be in tax, or she wants to be in healthcare. It's about those conversations. And then when you see something being done, as Danadi said, that isn't quite right, don't be afraid to challenge and say, hey, why did you do that? This opening was there. Why did you put a man instead of a woman? A woman was there before. Why are you replacing with a man? Or you're setting people for training. Why are there more men than women? So those are the kind of things that I think that we can do to change the narrative.
Thank you so much. Would you like to say something too?
I'd just like to add a little bit to that, to agree with everything entirely, but also add that you should build coalitions, right? Really, really build coalitions to support each other. Laterally, upwards, downwards, right? Just across the board, really build coalitions. It's so important, it's so helpful. Realize that men do that naturally, even without thinking about it. When men sit down and watch, is it Manchester United play Arsenal, blah, 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 right? That is building that coalition. That is it subconscious or subliminal? I never know the difference between the two words, but it translates into other things also in the workplace of mutual support. That's when they may say, there's this opportunity, right? Meanwhile, in the middle of watching a goal or arguing about who scored or who didn't score, right? You're going to play golf. Or just let's go and have a drink after work. Again, it's very casual, sorry to generalize. Most women might have to go home and take care of kids or go to school or something else, you're just fully focused on family. The guys are out there continuing this networking, which is, yes, maybe all social, but leads to professional opportunities and professional advancements, or even just hints. I may even say, man, this thing happened to me at work today. What do you think? I'm getting advice. I'm getting feedback. I know how to handle it, right? Again, it's all subconscious. And it's one of these things where I said, most of us as men, we don't even think about it. And it was later on I realized that is that boys' club people talk about, that men's club people talk about, right? When people talk about men's club before, I thought, I'm not in the men's club now. No one gave me a membership card, right? And I realized it's the softer things. And so you have to we've used the word intentionality. I think it's probably the most important word probably coming out of this session today. Be just very intentional about it, because no one is going to give it. You have to take it. And that means supporting each other and finding those champions, men and women, right? The champions who will really help to advocate and push forward and mentor or open doors, or just say, or remember you in those circumstances when no one else is going to speak up. It's really critical. Definitely all men. Someone gave us all a break. Yeah. Somebody gave us all we're not qualified for our positions, all right? We're not qualified for what we have. Someone said, let me just give the person a chance. And sometimes just because they had a closer social relationship, or they just see you more, whatever it is. So let's get away from this conversation about, are people ready? Is this one ready? Is this one, do they have enough exposure? Blah, blah, blah. We are all given chances, right? At every level. And then when someone gets that chance and we're about to drown, there are people that come out to support us and hold us up, right? So even when we get to, and men also, I don't know, just generalizing again, you might like to put up your hand saying, I can do it. I have no clue. You'll figure it out along the way.
Boldly.
You'll figure it out along the way. No, last, let me just get this, all right, and rough it. Again, generalize. A woman will say, I can't do X, I can't do Y. Let me just, And then you see one guy that you knows far less than you has taken it and run away. You say, if only I had known, right? And I know it's hard, but just needs, again, that constant, that support, mutual assurance, the push. It is very, very lonely. It is very, very lonely. But just building coalitions, being a lot more intentional, supporting each other. It's a long journey. We'll get there.
Thank you so much. Wow. I hear intentionality, building coalitions, be bold, and your coalitions upward, downward, sideways. Don't do life alone. You should be deliberate about your network and connect and take that bold step. But before I let you go, because I know I'm standing in between you and lunch, I had asked the panelists about their support for the push for 35% female representation on boards. So I'm throwing it open to you now. If you are in support of it, say aye. Aye. And the ayes have it. Thank you. Please do help me celebrate my amazing panelists, Ngova, Mr. Daladi, and Didi online. And of course, to celebrate yourselves. Oh yes, and Mr. Chairman, Mr. Nee, thank you so much. I mean, having this conversation, the best thing that we can do is to take action from here. In our little corners, in our big spaces. Let's be intentional about moving the dial and building an inclusive, not just boardroom, but Nigeria. Thank you very much. Thank you.